Now, Zakatul Fitr is part of Allah's rights in the wealth that we have. So previously we discussed the fourth pillar of Islam, which is Zakat, or the third pillar according to how people would count them. And we said that it is a must in 4 or 5 categories. Now, after concluding that chapter that deals with zakat, usually the scholars mention Zakatul Fitr or Sadaqatul Fitr. And this is something that is different to the previous chapter of Zakat. Because Zakat that we talked about is either mandatory in gold, silver, or currency, it's mandatory on livestock, camels, cows, sheep, goats. It's mandatory on the crops that are grown from the earth when harvested, such as corn, wheat, barley, etc. And it is mandatory upon the things that we trade in to make a profit. So commercial goods that are sold and bought and sold and bought, known as urud al-tijara. And the fifth category, which is rarely mentioned because it's rarely found, which is known as rikaz. And this is the treasure that people find hidden, and it has to be from the pre-Islamic era. So if you notice these 4 or 5 categories, the zakat is due on the wealth itself. But when we speak about Zakatul Fitr, it's different, because it's due on the individual and not on the wealth he possesses. What does that mean? It means that whether you are rich or poor, a specific amount that you must give out for each individual. And what is the ruling on it? The ruling on Zakat al-Fitr, it is mandatory. Ibn Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, says, Allah's Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam made the Zakat al-Fitr a sa' of dates or barley, binding on every Muslim, slave or free, male or female, young or old. And there are other hadiths, such as the hadith of Abu Sa'id al-Khudri and other companions, may Allah be pleased with them, all indicating that it is mandatory to give. Okay, are there any conditions for Zakat al-Fitr? Yes, there are. And the conditions mentioned here in the book, it says that it is recommended to be paid for the unborn. And this is not mandatory. This was suggested by Sayyiduna Uthman ibn Affan, may Allah be pleased with him, the third caliph, and it is a recommendation. But the vast majority of Muslims says that it is not mandatory because it was not mandated by the Prophet ﷺ, but it is still something that is considered to be negligible for those who can afford it, and hence giving it would be something beneficial. So what are the conditions? One is that it is given on behalf of a Muslim, which means that if you have a non-Muslim wife, you don't give Zakat al-Fitr on her. because he did not fast Ramadan. If you have a non-Muslim slave, you do not give Zakatul fitr on his behalf again, because he is not a Muslim and he did not fast Ramadan. The second condition is that you have access. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. You have more that is in excess to what you require for today and tonight's program of, let's say, rice. So this is your lunch and dinner. Do you have one sa' extra? And 99.9% of the people would say, yeah, sure, we do. In this case, it's obligatory upon you. But Sheikh, I have $100,000 in debt. Still, you have to give. Sheikh, I didn't receive my salary for 6 months. Okay, let's look into your house. Do you have extra to what you will need for today's lunch and dinner? Because tomorrow's Eid, there's no lunch. So do you have extra for today's or tonight's dinner, or tomorrow's lunch and dinner? I said, yeah, I have a lot of food in the kitchen. In this case, you have to give zakat. So these are the only two conditions that you have to bear in mind. Now, when we say that we give out zakat al-fitr, usually it is addressing the head of the family. So in my house, I have my wife, I have my children. I'm the head of the family. I'm the one who is obliged to give zakat al-fitr on each and every one of them. If I'm unable to do that, but they have money, then it becomes each one's own responsibility.